Marcus Ellison was 39 years old the Saturday morning. He watched a pearl-white Rolls-Royce Ghost pull up to the curb outside his former home, and his wife step into it, wearing a dress she had bought with money from the joint account he had not yet closed. He was parked half a block away in his Tacoma. He had not planned to be there. He had driven past out of the particular gravitational pull that divorce produces in men who are still processing what they lost. And he had slowed. And then he had stopped. And then he had sat very still and watched. The man who stepped out to open the door for her was tall, dressed well, carrying himself with the specific confidence of someone who believed the car was doing the talking. He had his hand at the small of her back for exactly the length of time required to make a point. Marcus looked at the license plate. Then he looked at it again. The plate was one he recognized because his leasing company's management system had generated it. The vehicle identification number, which he knew without looking it up because he had reviewed the Fleet Manifest 8 hours earlier, belonged to a 2023 Rolls-Royce Ghost that had been leased through Ellison Premier Automotive, his company, registered in Delaware. Managed from a Charlotte office his wife had driven past 100 times without knowing what the name above the door meant. To a man named Devin Ashworth 14 months ago at $7,400 per month. Devin Ashworth had been current on every payment. Devin Ashworth had no idea whose money was making the car possible. And Vanessa, his wife, his soon-to-be ex-wife, the woman who had told him 8 months ago that she needed a man with more ambition, had no idea she was being driven around Charlotte in a car that belonged to the man she was trying to leave behind. What happened next would cost them both everything they thought they had figured out. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The coffee was still hot. Marcus sat in the kitchen of his apartment on Moorhead Street, a furnished 2-bedroom that looked like a man was passing through rather than living, which was close enough to accurate, and held the mug with both hands and watched the morning light work across the countertop. He had grown up in Richmond, the grandson of a man named Theodore Ellison, who had run a small but profitable auto fleet business for 3 decades. Leasing vehicles to mid-tier companies and individual contractors who needed the appearance of a particular kind of success without the capital commitment of ownership. Theodore had built the business quietly from a single used car lot on the south side, and had died in 2011, leaving it to Marcus's father, who had died 3 years later, who had left it to Marcus with a note in the strongbox that said simply, "The car is never the point. The man who leases it needs to feel like the car. That feeling is the product." Marcus had taken the lesson and built a company around it. Ellison Premier Automotive was not, to the casual observer, the kind of business a man in a flannel shirt drove a used Tacoma to. It occupied a discreet suite in a South End office building, and managed a fleet of 41 vehicles, luxury sedans, SUVs, a small collection of exotic short-term rentals, leased primarily to executives, real estate developers, professional athletes on short-term contracts, and occasionally to men like Devin Ashworth, who needed the world to believe they were a certain kind of person. The company had cleared $2.1 million in net revenue the previous fiscal year. His operations manager, a meticulous woman named Phyllis, who had been with the company since Marcus's father's time, ran the day-to-day from the Charlotte office. Marcus appraised commercial real estate as his public-facing profession. That part was also true, also licensed, also the thing he led with when someone at a dinner party asked what he did. It was the smaller truth, which was the one most people were equipped to receive. Vanessa had known about the appraisal work. She had not known about the company. He had not hidden it from her with malice. He had hidden it from her the way his grandfather had hidden his balance sheet from people who hadn't earned the number, not out of shame, but out of the quiet conviction that the people who needed to know what something was worth before they could value it were precisely the people whose opinion of the value didn't matter. He had been planning to tell her. The first year of their marriage had been warm and specific, and full of the kind of ordinary intimacy that makes a man believe he has found the right person. Vanessa was sharp and funny, and made decisions quickly, which he had admired until he understood that she also made assessments quickly and held them without revision. By year 3, her assessment of him was complete. Comfortable but not ambitious. Steady but not hungry. The kind of man you appreciated in a certain season of life, and then, as the season changed, could not imagine carrying forward. He had heard this not in a single conversation, but in the aggregate of 100 small signals. The way she talked about other couples' homes, the way she responded to certain names at dinner parties, the way she had started saying we should think about where we want to be in 5 years, with an emphasis on the we that was really a question about whether there would be a we. He had not confronted any of it directly. He had watched and waited and kept his own counsel the way his grandfather had taught him, and tried to locate the moment when the marriage had become something other than what he had believed it was. He had not found the moment. He had only found the accumulation. The divorce filing had been hers. She had served him on a Tuesday morning in March, at the kitchen table where they had eaten breakfast together for 6 years, with the particular composure of a woman who had made her peace with a decision before she announced it. He had looked at the papers. He had looked at her. He had said, "All right." She had seemed almost disappointed that he hadn't argued. He had moved out 2 weeks later. He had not moved far. He had not moved desperately. He had taken his clothes, his grandfather's strongbox, the toolbox he kept in the hall closet, and the small framed photograph of his grandmother that had lived on his nightstand for 15 years. He had left the furniture, the art, the accumulated objects of a life that had been partly hers to curate. He had driven to the Moorhead apartment in the Tacoma and set the strongbox on the kitchen counter and stood in the empty room for a while and thought about his grandfather's note. The car is never the point. He picked up his phone from the counter. He opened the fleet management system. He scrolled to the ghost. Devon Ashworth. 14 months. Current, $7,400 per month. He set the phone down. He finished his coffee. He was not angry. He was precise. Those were different things. He had known something was wrong 6 weeks before the divorce filing, and he had known it the way he knew structural problems in a building, not from a single visible crack, but from the pattern of where the cracks were appearing. Vanessa had started going to her friend Claudette's on weekday evenings with a frequency that was new. Not every week, that would have been obvious, but often enough to establish a pattern that only became visible when he mapped it against other patterns. She had a new perfume she hadn't mentioned buying. She had started keeping her phone screen down on every surface, which she had never done before, which was the kind of behavioral change that was invisible until you noticed it and then impossible to unnotice. He had not gone looking. He was not that kind of man. But he was an observational man, and what he observed had assembled itself into a picture without his permission. The confirmation had come from an unlikely direction. He had been reviewing the fleet manifest on a Sunday afternoon, routine, quarterly audit, and had pulled up Devon Ashworth's account because the automated system had flagged a minor insurance documentation gap that needed resolution. He had looked at the contact information. Charlotte address. A phone number with a 704 area code. An employer listed as Ashworth Capital Partners, a boutique investment advisory with a website that was heavy on photography and light on specific accomplishments. He had run Devon Ashworth through the standard background check his company used for new lessees, pulling up the original file. The file had a photo ID scan as required. He had looked at the photo for a moment. He had seen the man before. Not clearly, not close. A profile in a restaurant once, months ago. A man at a table across the room who had made Vanessa look away when Marcus turned to see what she was looking at. He had filed it without filing it, the way you file things you don't yet have the complete context to understand. His hands did not shake. He was a man whose grandfather had built a business on understanding exactly what a thing was worth, and exactly who needed it, and exactly why. He had grown up learning to read the gap between appearance and reality. Devon Ashworth was a man who leased a $7,400 per month car on what the business record suggested was an income that made that payment a significant stretch. He was a man who needed to feel like the car. Marcus had documented the connection with a single screenshot. He had added it to a folder on his desktop he named simply Fleet. Then, he had gone to the kitchen and made dinner, and when Vanessa came home from Claudette's at 9:30, he had asked if she was hungry, and she had said no. She'd eaten, and he had said okay. He was not performing calm. He was calm. That was the discipline his grandfather had built into him. Not the suppression of feeling, but the understanding that feeling was not information. Evidence was information. Evidence was what you built with. He picked up his phone and called his attorney, a woman named Patricia Howell, whose office was on South Tryon, and whose reputation was built on the particular combination of precision and patience that Marcus had recognized as his own language the first time they met. "Patricia," he said, "I need to come in." "When?" she said. "This week," he said. "There are some things I want to structure before the divorce process goes further." A brief pause. "How complicated?" she said. "Not complicated," he said. "Complete." Patricia Howell reviewed his documents across 2 hours on a Wednesday morning, with the expression of a woman who had seen many configurations of human financial life and had long since stopped registering surprise as a productive response. She reviewed the Fleet Company operating documents. The Devon Ashworth lease. The Fleet manifest. The revenue figures from the previous 3 fiscal years. The appraisal practice licensing and fee records. The real estate investment accounts held in the separate LLC. The trust his grandfather had established in 1998 that had matured and been rolled into a structured investment account that Patricia herself had helped protect 3 years prior. She set down her pen. "Vanessa has no knowledge of the Fleet Company," she said. "None. She's aware of the appraisal income." "Yes, which represents approximately what percentage of your total income?" "Roughly 18% in a typical year." Patricia looked at him with the particular expression of an attorney absorbing a number. The Fleet Company and the investment accounts are entirely separate property predating the marriage. Everything is documented to that effect. And Devon Ashworth. She paused on the name with the controlled neutrality of a professional. "He has no knowledge of who he's leasing from. The lease is with the LLC. My name doesn't appear in the lease documents in any personal capacity." "Does he know Vanessa is married?" "I have no direct evidence either way." Patricia picked up her pen and made a mark. "Here's what I want you to understand about your position, Marcus. The lease is a valid commercial instrument. You are under no legal obligation to disclose your identity to Devon Ashworth. You are under no obligation to disclose the Fleet Company's existence to Vanessa beyond what the asset disclosure in the divorce proceeding requires, and the company's value, properly documented as separate property, is yours." She paused. "What you do have is complete informational advantage. The question is how you use it." Carefully, he said. That's the right answer. She looked at him steadily. What do you want out of the divorce? A clean exit, he said. The joint assets divided fairly. My separate property protected. And clarity. He paused. She told me I wasn't ambitious enough. I want her to understand what she said that about. Patricia was quiet for a moment. There's a way to do that, she said, that is entirely within your rights and that I can structure properly. She folded her hands. It will require patience. Patience, Marcus said, is the one thing I have never run short of. His uncle Reginald was 68 and had worked in automotive fleet management for the city of Charlotte for 30 years before his retirement. A man who understood the mechanics of vehicle leasing at the level of policy and paperwork, and who had been telling Marcus since he was 17 that the automobile was the most effective tool of social communication in American life, by which he meant that a man's car told you what he needed the world to believe about him before he opened his mouth. Marcus sat on Reginald's back porch on a Saturday afternoon with a glass of sweet tea and walked him through the situation. Reginald listened without interruption. When Marcus finished, he was quiet for a moment, looking at the yard where a catalpa tree had dropped its long bean pods all over the grass. Devon Ashworth, Reginald said. Investment advisory. Boutique. Website looks expensive. Business looks thin. And the car. 7 for a month. 14 months in. He's current. Reginald made a sound that was not quite a laugh. That's a man who has decided the car is the business plan. He looked at Marcus. You never told her about the company. No, why not? Marcus held his tea glass and looked at the catalpa tree. My grandfather used to pull into customers' lots in a 15-year-old pickup, he said. He said if they needed him to drive something better before they could take him seriously, they weren't worth taking seriously. I think I took that further than he meant it. He paused. I held it close because I wanted to be taken at face value. What I didn't account for is that face value requires a face. Reginald was quiet for a moment. Your grandfather also said something else. You remember what it was? Which one? About documents. Marcus nodded. He said, the man who keeps the paper keeps the power. He did say that. Reginald set down his tea. You've got the paper, son, every page of it. Now it's just a matter of when you show it. He reached into the pocket of his shirt and produced a folded piece of paper. One more thing. Your cousin Darnell knows a man who does administrative work at Ashworth Capital Partners. I asked some general questions, nothing that went anywhere improper. He held out the paper. But you should see this. Marcus unfolded it. It was a printout of a county civil court record. A judgment from 18 months ago. Ashworth Capital Partners, defendant, a former client, plaintiff, the amount $94,000. The status unsatisfied. Devon Ashworth had a $94,000 civil judgment against his company that had not been paid. 14 months ago, he had leased a $7,400 per month vehicle. The math described a man building a facade with borrowed load-bearing capacity and no foundation underneath. Marcus folded the paper and placed it in his jacket. Real power, Reginald said, picking up his tea again, operates in quiet rooms. He looked at his uncle. I know, he said. I've been quiet long enough. By the following Thursday, Phyllis had pulled the complete Devon Ashworth account file from the fleet management system and prepared a client summary with the thoroughness she brought to everything. 12 months of payment records, the original lease application, the insurance documentation, the vehicle condition reports from the quarterly inspections, and a flag she had added to the bottom of the summary in her precise administrative handwriting. Lessee inquiry lease extension received this week. Requesting 24-month renewal at current rate. Devin Ashworth wanted to extend the lease. Marcus read the summary at his desk on Friday morning. He read the extension request twice. He picked up his phone and called Phyllis. "The Ashworth renewal," he said. "Tell him we need to schedule a lease review meeting before we can confirm the extension. Standard procedure for renewals over 12 months. Put it in the conference room at the South End office." "Do you want me to run a new credit check?" Phyllis asked. "Full background refresh," he said. "Everything current." A pause. "Should I flag anything in particular?" "The civil judgment from 18 months ago," he said. "And anything else that's appeared since the original application." Another pause. The pause of a woman who had worked for this family long enough to understand that a specific instruction meant a specific situation was developing. "Understood," Phyllis said. "What date should I propose for the review?" 3 weeks from Monday, Marcus said. "And Phyllis, don't tell him who he'll be meeting with. Just say a senior account representative will be present." He went home that evening and made dinner in the Moorhead apartment and ate at the kitchen counter and thought about his grandfather's lot on the south side of Richmond, the single-used car and what had been built from it. The note in the strongbox, the particular philosophy of a man who had understood from the beginning that the product was never the car. He was done being patient. He texted Patricia, ready to move. "Schedule the full disclosure meeting for the week after next. All parties." She responded in 3 minutes, "I'll make the calls." The lease review meeting was on a Monday. The full disclosure meeting was on a Friday of the same week. Marcus had designed it this way deliberately, the way he designed everything, sequentially, load-bearing element by load-bearing element, the structure assembled in the order that made it sound. Devin Ashworth arrived at the South End office on Monday at 11 o'clock in the Pearl White Ghost, which Marcus watched from the window of his office as it pulled into the small lot. Devin stepped out with the ease of a man who had been stepping out of that car for over a year and had incorporated it completely into his self-presentation. He was dressed well. He was carrying himself correctly. He was, by every visible indicator, the man he was performing. Phyllis brought him into the conference room. Marcus let him sit for 4 minutes. Then he walked in, set his copy of the account file on the table, and sat down across from Devin Ashworth. Devin looked at him with the polite uncertainty of a man meeting someone he does not recognize in a context where he expected someone familiar. "Marcus Ellison," Marcus said. "I'm the principal of Ellison Premier." Devin's expression recalibrated. "I wasn't aware the principal handled renewals personally," he said. "I don't, usually," Marcus said. "Occasionally a file warrants closer attention." He opened the folder. "Your renewal request?" 24 months at the current rate." "That's right. The car has been perfect. No issues with the service." "Good." Marcus set the civil judgment printout on the table, facing Devin. "We ran the standard background refresh for the renewal." This came up. Devin looked at the document. Something moved through his face, not panic, but the adjustment a man makes when something he has managed carefully suddenly becomes visible in the wrong room. "That matter is being addressed," Devin said. $94,000. Unsatisfied 18 months, Marcus said. "At our renewal threshold, we'd need documentation of resolution or a substantial security deposit to extend." He paused. "I want to be straightforward with you, Devin, because I think straightforward is more respectful than the alternative." He set his hands flat on the table. "We know what the vehicle costs you each month relative to what your documented income supports. We approved the original lease because the application was technically within parameters. The renewal creates a different risk profile." Devin was quiet. The car was not talking anymore. The room was. "I'll need to think about my options," Devin said. Of course, Marcus said. Phyllis will send you the full renewal requirements documentation by end of week. You'll have 30 days to respond. He stood. I appreciate you coming in. Devon stood. He extended his hand, and Marcus shook it and walked him to the lobby and watched through the window as he got back into the Ghost and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment before starting the engine. Marcus went back to his office. He sat down. He opened the folder for the Friday meeting and reviewed it one more time. Preparation, he thought, is the work. Patricia had arranged the Friday meeting at her conference room on South Tryon. She had invited Vanessa and Vanessa's divorce attorney, a competent man named Gerald Watts, who had been professional throughout the proceedings. Marcus had asked Patricia to also invite, as a courtesy, Vanessa's mother Sandra, not as a legal party. But because Sandra had asked Marcus twice during the separation whether there was anything she hadn't understood about the situation, and Marcus had told her both times that there were things that would become clear in time. The time was now. Marcus arrived last. He wore his work clothes. He set his portfolio binder on the table and sat across from Vanessa and did not look away when she met his eyes. She looked the same. She looked composed in the way she always looked composed, by effort, which was not the same as his composure, which was simply what he was made of. He had always loved that about her, and it had not stopped being true. Patricia opened the proceedings. She explained that the purpose of the meeting was full asset disclosure as required by the divorce proceedings, and that some of what would be disclosed had not been previously known to the petitioner or her counsel. Gerald Watts picked up his pen. Patricia began with the appraisal practice, the known quantity. Then she moved to the investment accounts, then the real estate holdings in the secondary LLC, then the trust. Then, last, she set the Ellison Premier Automotive Operating Summary on the table. She read the company name. Vanessa looked at the document. Patricia read the fleet size, the annual net revenue, the client roster summary, anonymized with aggregate values, the company history, founded by Theodore Ellison, passed to Marcus Ellison's father, inherited by Marcus Ellison in 2014. The room was quiet. 41 vehicles, Patricia said. Net revenue in the most recent fiscal year, $2.1 million. Gerald Watts set down his pen. He picked it up again. Vanessa's mother Sandra made a small sound that was not a word. Vanessa looked at Marcus. Her expression was not the anger he had expected or the contempt he had prepared for. It was the expression of a woman doing rapid, painful accounting of a long sequence of assumptions. The company manages a luxury fleet, Patricia continued. Vehicles leased to executives and private clients in the Charlotte and regional market. She paused and set one more document on the table. One of the current active leases, Marcus, you'd like to address directly? Yes, Marcus said. He set the Devon Ashworth account summary on the table, the lease details, the vehicle identification, the payment history, and at the bottom, in Phyllis's handwriting, the flag about the renewal request. He watched Vanessa read the vehicle description. He watched her read the plate number. He watched her understand. The color in her face changed in a way that was not dramatic, but was total. He doesn't know, Marcus said quietly. Devon Ashworth has been paying $7,400 a month to my company for 14 months. He has never known whose name is on the LLC. He came in on Monday to discuss renewing the lease. He paused. I thought you should know that the car was always mine. The room held the silence the way a room holds it after something has been said that cannot be unsaid. Sandra was looking at her hands. Gerald Watts was looking at his legal pad. Vanessa was looking at Marcus with the particular expression of a woman who has asked a question and received an answer she cannot dispute. "I'm not angry," Marcus said. "I want to be clear about that. I'm not doing this to humiliate you. You told me I wasn't ambitious enough. You were looking for ambition in a place it was never going to be visible because I never chose to make it visible to you." He paused. "That's partly on me. I held it too close. I should have showed you sooner. But I also think you had already decided, and the showing wouldn't have changed it." Vanessa was very still. "I think," she said, "that's probably true." It was the most honest thing she had said to him in 2 years, and they both knew it. Marcus stood. He gathered his copy of the binder. He looked at Sandra. "You asked me twice if there was something you hadn't understood," he said. "I hope this answers it." Sandra looked up at him. "I owe you an apology," she said, "for some things I said that I thought you didn't hear." "You were trying to protect her," he said. "I understand that." He picked up his jacket. He walked to the door and paused, not looking back, standing for a single moment in the frame of it. He thought about the car in the lot on the south side of Richmond, the one his grandfather had started with. A single vehicle. A clear-eyed understanding of what people needed to feel. 40 years of patience and documentation, and the discipline to hold the balance sheet close until the balance sheet was the only argument required. He thought about the note in the strongbox. The car is never the point. He walked out. 15 months had passed like a long, well-executed project reaching its natural close. Marcus was in the workshop behind the house he had bought in Noda 8 months prior. A 1950s brick bungalow with good bones, and a backlot large enough for the workshop he had built from a kit over 3 weekends with his uncle Reginald, who had strong opinions about ventilation and insulation, and had contributed both expertise and a running commentary that Marcus had found more comforting than he would have admitted. He was working on a dining table. White oak again because he was loyal to white oak, the grain of it, and the weight of it, and the way it held finish, without losing its own character. The table was for the house, the first piece he had built for himself rather than as a project, which felt like a particular kind of arrival. The fleet company had expanded. Phyllis had hired 2 administrative staff, and they had added 8 vehicles to the roster, including a collection of 3 vintage luxury cars for the event and wedding market, which had turned out to be more profitable than Marcus had projected. The Devon Ashworth lease had not been renewed. Devon had returned the Ghost in good condition at the end of his term, 3 weeks after the Monday meeting, and had not communicated further. The Ghost had been detailed, inspected, and leased within 6 weeks to a corporate client at a slightly higher monthly rate. It sat in someone else's driveway now, doing its work. The divorce had been finalized 9 months prior. Clean, as Marcus had intended. Joint assets divided fairly, his separate property fully protected by Patricia's architecture. No contested proceedings. Vanessa had not fought the asset division. Marcus had offered her an amount above the legal minimum from the joint marital property, and she had accepted it. And Patricia had said afterward that in her experience people accepted above minimum offers when they understood they had less leverage than they had believed. A woman named Renata had come into his life through Calvin Reese, his old mentor, who had introduced them at a dinner with the particular air of a man who believes he is being subtle and is not. Renata was an architect who specialized in adaptive reuse, converting old industrial buildings into mixed-use residential, which was work that required exactly the combination of structural intelligence and imaginative vision that Marcus found most interesting in a person. She asked good questions. She sat with the answers. She had been to the workshop once and had run her hand along the surface of the emerging table and said, "You understand the material." He had thought that was exactly right. She was not the center of the story. She was just present in it. and her presence was real. He heard through Phyllis, who maintained, without being asked, a professional awareness of the fleet company's client-adjacent universe, that Devon Ashworth had dissolved Ashworth Capital Partners and relocated to Atlanta. The civil judgment remained unsatisfied. He had been seen at a charity event that made the Charlotte social pages, driving a domestic sedan. Whether this represented a recalibration of his philosophy or a temporary condition, Marcus neither knew nor particularly cared to know. Vanessa had taken a regional director position with a company in Raleigh. Sandra had called Marcus once, 3 months after the divorce, to say that she hoped he was well, and that she had raised her daughter to be smarter than she had been, and that she was sorry for the ways in which the raising had been incomplete. Marcus had said, "She's sharp, Sandra. She'll figure it out." He had meant it. He set down the plane. He ran his palm along the table surface. The oak was almost ready. Another session or two, and he could move to finishing. He thought about where it would sit in the dining room, the light that would find it in the morning, the meals that would eventually happen at it, and the people who would sit around it, and the conversations that would be had. His grandfather had built a fleet from a single car on a South Side lot, with a 15-year-old pickup and a philosophy that fit on one line of a note card. Marcus had built something larger, but the philosophy was the same. Know what things are worth. Hold the documentation. Let the work speak when the time for speaking comes. He picked up his coffee from the workbench. He stood in the door of the workshop and looked at the yard, the Japanese maple going deep red in the fall, the catalpa he'd planted in the corner after Reginald's yard had put the idea in his head, the whole of it particular, and made, and his. The car was never the point. He was free. He was solvent. He was unbothered. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.